Good morning and welcome to the TPN Credit Bureau YouTube channel. With me in studio today is Odette van Rooyen, the head of data of TPN, and she's going to be facilitating the session for us today. So please keep your questions coming in. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please remember that you need to be logged into YouTube to be able to access the chat. You can post all your questions directly therein. Odette, you're probably going to be interrupting me, hopefully, while I speak today. If it's specific questions regarding the subject matter, perhaps regarding the legislation, when we're going through the system, you can also ask those. If it's more general questions, we're going to wait until the end. We're going to be running a 15-minute Q&A right at the end of the formal session, in which you can post all your questions regarding what we've discussed today, how to do certain things, processes perhaps, but you're more than welcome to ask us those questions. If we don't get to all of the questions during today's session, please remember you can just contact our help desk at helpdesk@tpn.co.za, as well as calling us on the 0861 876 000 number. Probably going to hear me saying Wendy Bartholomew quite a lot today, but you can speak to her specifically regarding this. She knows the processes. She's the person that actually goes out to the schools to perform the physical and electronic checks that we're going to be discussing in today's session. Also, please note the feedback forms is going to be posted during the 15-minute Q&A. Vitally important for our own feedback. If you'd like new training sessions, perhaps training sessions on different parts of the legislation for schools, please request those. We'd love to hear your feedback. It's always very important for us to see exactly what we're doing right, not what we're doing wrong, because we don't do anything wrong, but what we're doing right. I'm joking. You're more than welcome to say anything. And those feedback forms can obviously assist us in the next training sessions upcoming throughout the year. Also, if we seem a little bit blurry, please click on the right hand bottom of the screen. There's a cog there. Go and select 720p or higher. We didn't get dressed up for nothing. Perhaps if you don't like the way we look, go and select 240p, but usually we do look pretty good on camera. So just go and select that cog button and go and select 720p or higher. The format for today, I'm going to take us through a couple of slides specifically on the legislation, how our process works, where this process comes from, what you need to do as a school, as an educator, as a principal to ensure your compliance in terms of the two pieces of legislation that we're going to be discussing today. Then I'm going to take you through a system demo, specifically showcasing how to perform your criminal clearance checks directly off the TPN system, and obviously to request the Commissioner of Oaths as well as the technician to come through to your school and perform those vitally important criminal clearance checks directly at your school. Before I talk too much, let's just get into the slides. Odette, please interrupt me, specifically if I talk too much, and then we can answer those questions during the session. So just a short introduction on why we're doing this today. Why is it so important? There's multiple pieces of legislation that regulate criminal checking procedures at schools. For some of your schools, if you're employing new teachers, new staff, you're going to ask for something called a police clearance check. Unfortunately, there are other pieces of legislation that comes into play over here that needs to be taken into consideration, and you need to follow certain procedures to ensure your compliance with both the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, as well as the Children's Act. These two pieces of legislation specifically talk to registers, and registers that you need to check certain employees at the school, your SGB staff members, admin staff, ground staff, basically any person that comes into contact with children. But we're going to show you those definitions on screen later. But these are the pieces of legislation that ensures that you as an educator, you as a school, you as a principal, stay compliant when it comes to the safety of the children at the school. This legislation applies to any organization who employs staff members who in any manner or placed in a position of authority, supervision or care of a child or person who is mentally disabled. This is very important to take note. It's not just necessarily for schools, it's for aftercare centers, it's for any person who employs people who is coming into contact with children or with mentally disabled persons. in terms of both the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, as well as the Children's Act. The registers and where they come from are established in both pieces of legislation. The registers, specifically when it comes to the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, is the Sexual Offences Register. It is a register that contains details of persons who has been convicted of a sexual offence. Whereas the other register, the Child Protection Register, established in terms of the Children's Act, specifically Part B, speaks to people who are not suitable to work with children. So these two registers are separate. Both of these registers need to be checked. So it's not just the normal process whereby a person can just place fingerprints and do that system and run it through AFISwitch. You need to actually go and check the names against both of these registers in terms of these the pieces of legislation in front of you today. It's also vitally important, just like what we said, the definition of employer in terms of the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, is that it is any person who employs, who appoints, who has people supervising children in a day-to-day context. So it's going to be any person that falls into those categories that need to be checked, not just through AFISwitch, but both of these registers as well. Consequences. Now, I usually don't like to talk about consequences when it comes to pieces of legislation because the consequences are usually very far-ranging, they're very broad, but let's just stop here for a moment. The consequence is not just a moral and ethical one. It is obviously encapsulated in terms of the legislation, but it is vitally important not just to protect the school, the principal who is ultimately responsible, but the children at the school as well. And if you're not performing the checks in this manner, in this process flow, unfortunately you're not being compliant in terms of the two pieces of legislation we've been talking about today. So, should the school not clear staff against the appropriate registers, this can result in criminal prosecution for the person responsible, as well as a fine, and may lead to up to 7 years imprisonment. This is a big consequence. It's a vital one to go and have a look at. But at the end of the day, you do have an obligation to protect the children, and to protect the children through running this process against both registers. The person ultimately responsible will be the principal of the school. So all those principals listening in today, please remember, you need to go and do this. It's not something that we're just making up with thumb sucking. It's to ensure your compliance in terms of both pieces of the legislation. Also, just take note that when the checks are done and a person is to be found to have a sexual offense against a minor, that person, that party at the school, their employment must be terminated forthwith, immediately. Meaning that if you do get a result back in this regard and you know of this and you don't terminate the employment forthwith, this consequence also applies. The consequence applies to not performing these checks, as well as if the person is actually convicted of that sexual offense against a minor, that these consequences come into the fray. So very important over here. Remember these consequences. It is so vital to go and perform the correct procedure when you're doing your criminal clearance checks. The TPN process. Now we're going to run through a couple of sections over here regarding the process that we follow, the process that we provide to all clients, educators, principals, and schools at TPN. You're going to see how easy it is. I'm going to show it to you on the system after I've gone through the slide. But really the process is incredibly simple. So let's start at the beginning. Odette, because you're head of data, I'm going to start with data. Okay. So for all schools, it is very important to go and submit your employment information directly to TPN Credit Bureau. The reason being is that if you submit the employment information, you're going to be able to see the employment information directly through the employment verification check, which I'm going to show you off the system. But also, TPN will provide you with the TPN Sexual Offences Compliance Certificate after they have had a look at the people on your payroll, as well as the number of parties that we have actually done the physical as well as electronic checks on those people. So we can provide you with a certificate saying that you're 100% compliant when it comes to both pieces of legislation. So you want that. You want to be able to go and have a look at the employment verification, have a look at the employment data on TPN, but also then we can provide you with a certificate. It's very simple to submit data into the Bureau. So first things first, you're going to contact Odette, you're going to contact Wendy at the office, normally through the help desk at tpn.co.za or through the office line 0861 876 000. You can just speak to the data department and they will assist you in getting that data loaded on. You can do so directly through your payroll systems. A lot of those payroll systems integrate directly with the TPN system, but also you can submit your UIF files also to TPN. Important here, Odette, just to mention, we don't capture payment information, salary information. So we will say if the person is a salary earner or a commission earner, but we don't actually capture what the person makes. It's purely to see if the person is employed at the school or at another company, if their contract has been terminated, if they've been dismissed, and that information gets pushed through into the TPN system. Okay. Then, once you have submitted your data, you can then go into the TPN system. If you're not yet a subscriber, you can directly contact our sales department. Rachel will assist you with that to get you online, to get you signed up to TPN. And through that process, we're going to provide you with a login directly to the website that I'm going to showcase in just a moment. You're going to perform the process that I'm going to show you on the screen after this slide, and you are going to perform the criminal clearance check directly off the system. It's going to provide you with certain details like a CRC number, but at the end of the day, you need to go do that so that we can come to your school and perform your clearances. Then our consultants book a time and bring the appropriate devices, forms, and I see here a commissioner of oaths. So we bring a commissioner of oaths along that can actually go and commission those documents like the IDs and perform the physical fingerprints directly at the school. The employees then need to arrive at the scheduled time with 3 copies of their ID or passport plus the original document, so the Commissioner of Oaths can actually have a look at the original and certify the copies that they've provided. We then perform both electronic as well as the physical fingerprints at the school. So we actually sit down. It usually takes around about 10 minutes per employee. We take them through the process. We ask them a couple of questions. We perform the electronic and physical checks directly at the school. We then submit those electronic files directly to AFISwitch, and the results will return in a period of 24 to 48 hours when there is no illicit activity on the person's ID as well as those fingerprints. If there is possible illicit activity, the criminal report can take up to 8 weeks. This is important to note because it might kick out your process of us granting you your TPN Sexual Offences Compliance Certificate to a period of 8 weeks. But if there's no illicit activity, usually takes around about 24 to 48 hours. We then have to manually submit the fingerprints directly to the different registers, like what we've discussed in this session today. So we go and submit all of those physical documents to the National Register of Sexual Offences in terms of Section 45 of the Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, and then we submit to the Department of Social Development in terms of Section 123 of that Children's Act. We will take all the documents there, they have it in their possession, and then they run it against the registers. You will then, as a school, as the principal, receive the result back directly from those registers, hopefully within a period of 21 days. Unfortunately, this could take obviously a little bit longer due to inundation. I'm sure they're very busy having a look at a lot of people's physical fingerprints, but at the end of the day, it takes around about 21 days. But remember, it could take a substantial amount of time longer than that. If you then have submitted your UIF data to TPN, we've received back from AFISwitch that there is no illicit activity on the employees that we've done this through, And remember, we go and check it against your UIF files as well as your or your payroll system. Then we can provide you with a TPN Sexual Offences Compliance Certificate showing the percentage of staff checked and who complied with the regulations. It's really as simple as that. All that you really need to do, just to break down this a little bit further. Number one, submit your data into the Bureau. Number two, go onto the system, go and perform those criminal clearance checks directly off the TPN system. We'll then arrange everything else and you'll get the results back as well as your compliance certificate once we've checked it through on your UIF or payroll data. The next step in the procedure, the next step for today is I'm actually going to go into the system and I'm going to showcase exactly how to perform that criminal check directly through TPN Credit Bureau. If you don't yet have access to the TPN system, remember, like I told you, you can contact Rachel in the office just on the normal 0861 876 000 number. She will then get you signed up, give you a username as well as a unique login. But when you log into the TPN system, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see our dashboard. To perform those criminal clearance checks, click on Credit Check right up at the top. Under Consumer Checks, click on New Credit Check right over there. The inquiry reason is vital. Go and select Employment and Qualification Verification. You can add in your own reference, whatever you'd like, whatever's going to make it easier for you at the end of the day to reference the specific check, perhaps on the invoice. You can change this to a passport number as well, so we can perform the check not just on ID numbers, but passport numbers as well. Go and type the person's first name, as well as their surname, the current address, postal code, province, cell number, as well as landline number if it's applicable, and then go and click Next. Now from this step 2, very important to confirm your consent. Click on the basic critics. Obviously this is a demo system that I'm running through, so this has not been taken away. Just ignore that for me, please, for today's purposes. Consumer verification, ensure that you are verifying the person's identity. We run this through the National Populations Register as well as the Department of Home Affairs. Make sure you click on the NCA Compliance Declaration button right at the bottom and then go and click Next. Should you have Smart Check available? Smart Check is the inquiry that you can perform for a person handling cash or finances at the school, perhaps a bursa, etc., or a new bursa coming in. It's also only available, Odette, if you submit data into the Bureau. So once again, you can contact Odette about that. Go and deselect this TPN Smart Check if it has been activated for you. Make sure you are clicking the employment verification right over there. Because you've now submitted data, you can actually perform an employment verification as well. And then click on the TPN SAYS check right at the bottom. This will then immediately perform the credit check, or rather the criminal clearance on the prospective employee. Just remember, we need to come and do fingerprints. We need to come and do our physical as well, electronic fingerprints over here. So this is just a confirmation that obviously the fingerprints is still required to get us through AFIS Switch as well as the other 2 registers. And then click Finish. Going to ignore the summary page for today. Not important, but we're going to click on Employment. I don't think I've mentioned this previously, but you'll only be able to see this information on your employment verification if you've submitted data into the Bureau. So if you have not, it's going to come up with a little red box. It looks like this, just saying that you can contact our help desk to assist you in submitting the data. If you have, however, submitted data, it is going to showcase Freddie Smith's ID number, their full name, whether they're married or not, the gender, dependent, citizenship, date of birth, as well as age. And then it's going to give you some vital information on the person's previous or current employment. As we can see, there's multiple companies that Freddie Smith has previously been employed at. The one contract says terminated. There was only a basic salary that was paid, no com. And then the second one, he was actually dismissed, salary and com, basic and commission. We also, you can see from this, we're not capturing any payment information or rather salary information, and how much that salary or commission is. And then we can see the last one, currently employed at that specific employer. Next, click on your crim track right up at the top. This is a very important number, the CRC number for us. You're more than welcome to print out the screen. You can give it to us when we come and do those checks at the school. We're obviously going to have it as well because we can see which checks have been run on the system. But it's an important number because that number we actually go and input when we go and run this through the APHIS switch system. We can also see that because we've just requested this and we haven't yet done fingerprints, it's going to say waiting for applicant to capture fingerprints. This is how you're going to get involved in the process. Wendy will then be contacted, or rather Wendy's going to contact you, or another representative of TPN will contact you. We'll arrange for a time for the Commission of Oaths and the technician to come through to perform those fingerprints directly at the school. Once you've waited your 24 to 48 hours, you can once again go and click on credit checks right up at the top and go and click on view mailbox up at the down at the bottom. What you'll notice is we've run a couple of criminal checks directly off this demo system, but say for example we've now waited our 24 to 48 hours, received your notification, you can go into that person's criminal check investigation, and what you'll see from the criminal check that we've run on patients is that the requested date, the date of birth, and the result given. What we've said over here is negative. This person has no illicit activity that can be identified through the APHIS search system. Remember, this takes 24 to 48 hours. If there's possible illicit activity, you're going to have to wait for up to 8 weeks to receive that criminal record to showcase what type of criminal activity has actually occurred on this person's fingerprints as well as the ID. Odette, that brings us to a close of the formal session today. Feels like I spoke quite a lot. Do we have any questions that we can run through?
We do. We have actually answered a few on the chat, but for the people who missed it. So Clever Students asked that they did their Form 29 and Form 30 through SA Childcare, and they were asking, do they have to do it again?
So no, not necessarily. If it's been run against both the registers as well as the APHIS switch check has been done, it would not be a requirement. Wendy always says this when she goes to schools, but usually, and Odette, you can help me if I'm wrong here, but usually you'd like to do one of these inquiries on a person every 2 years or so.
So with regards to the Child Protection Register and the Sexual Offences Register, we all know that it's a manual process.
Yes, yeah.
And the result does take long. So the immediate one for you is to do your biometrics because it's an immediate, and there is recommendation that you do it at least once every 2 years.
It's a good idea.
Okay. Another question, Alicia also has asked, how often do we do the criminal check? And like we say, we recommend that you do it. I could have no offense this year, but something could have happened. So to cover yourself, you have to kind of...
You'll probably run this process sort of every single year for new employees at least, when they are employed. But for any person that is currently busy working at the school, we would prescribe a period of 2 years, yes.
Okay, so then there's a question, is this process accepted by SACE?
Yes, it is. That's why we've got the TPN SACE inquiry when you went through the system.
For schools especially.
Yes.
And then Andrea has asked, what if somebody has a criminal record, let's say drug trafficking, which we do pick up quite a lot, and has been cleared on the child protection and sexual offenders. This offence has only come at light after the employee was employed.
So both those pieces of legislation that we mentioned today, the Criminal Law Amendment Act as well as the Children's Act, prescribes that only if a sexual offence has been committed against a minor that the school can terminate immediately or forthwith. If it's for something else, no, it's not prescribed in the Act that a person's employment must be terminated, but it also depends on your employment contract. If the person has perhaps been fraudulent or they haven't told you about this, though they should have, in terms of that employment process, very possibly that you can take further disciplinary action, but it's only terminated forthwith in the instances where they are actually captured on the specific registers for sexual offences against a minor.
Okay, another question. one of the questions, what happens if an expungement is in process?
So expungement of a specific criminal action. Well, that means that it hasn't yet been expunged, and it depends on the reasons for the expungement, I would believe. If we don't mind, could we take that one offline, perhaps? Just save that person's details, and then we'll get back to you right after the session.
Cool. And then, let's see here. Do we accept extramurals to have this check to be done as well?
Most certainly. The legislation requires that any person who comes in contact, supervises, works with children, even if it's just once, they need to have this specific check done as well as run against those registers. Protect yourself properly when it comes to this. Rather be over-compliant than under-compliant, but the pieces of legislation specifically dictates that any person who comes in contact, supervisors, etc., needs to be checked.
Okay, then if found guilty on a register, is it cause for dismissal?
Great question. Like what we've mentioned previously, it depends on the actual sexual offence and whether it's been committed against a minor, and that would be terminated forthwith. But like I said, in terms of your employment contract, it depends what you've written in there. It depends if the person has lied to you, been fraudulent, etc. Further disciplinary action can follow in certain cases.
Then Alicia, sorry, I can't pronounce the name, I apologize. Is it the same as Form 29? And she's saying, sorry, that she's asking again. So there's two forms. There's actually three sides here. The one is the biometric fingerprints, which we get directly from the SAPS database through AFISwitch. Then there's the Form 29, which is submitted on behalf of the employer to the Child Protection Register. And then there is the Form J8, the SAPS criminal form, but also that goes with the form from the Sexual Offences Register that is submitted to the registrar. So there's three sides happening. You have to, by law, submit your manual fingerprints to the NRSO. You have to submit your application to the Child Protection Register. And for yourself, you do the criminal check because that is an immediate response to see if somebody's on the Sexual Offences Register.
Within the 24 to 48 hours,
Correct.
like we mentioned.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, what is the minimum number of staff member you will come to the school? We have 3 new staff members at the moment that needs to be checked. Can we do this and submit the forms ourselves?
Will you get that one for us?
Yes. So when we come out to the school, it's normally a minimum of 10 staff members. If you don't mind, please email Wendy at TPN and we can just assist you to guide you on where they can go and how we can assist you best.
Perhaps through a TPN centre.
Yes. And they're asking for the cost to do the criminal check through TPN.
So 280 Rand excluding VAT, and that includes everything that we mentioned today, as well as the Commissioner of Oaths and the technician actually coming to the school to perform those, to perform the fingerprints as well as the criminal clearance.
And I think
Done
that's
for
it
today.
for the questions.
Wow, can you believe it? We're out of here in half an hour. If you have any further questions, please remember you can just contact us on the helpdesk at tpn.co.za, or phone the number 0861 876 000. Speak to the data department for submissions of the data. And if you'd like to book your criminal checks, you need assistance with the system, please feel free to speak to Wendy, or if you're not yet a subscriber of TPN, you're more than welcome to speak to Rachel in the office as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Please remember those feedback forms are currently live. Go and complete those for us. Have a fantastic day further, everybody.
Keep well. Bye.